Welcome to the channel and welcome to today's run through of all the latest Manchester United news and transfer updates, keeping you right up to date with everything. I'm Jamie. Before we get into it, smash a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. We've got a lot to go through today as the fallout continues from the disastrous season. We've got dressing room leaks, the financial kind of reality of the situation, the massive rebuild that's ahead of us with some big plans in the summer. Everybody up for sale, exit news, Mateta news, loads to go through today. So let's jump straight into it. So let's kick off with the clear out. So Manchester United will listen to offers for every player in the wake of their disastrous Europa League final defeat. No player will be immune from being sold, including captain Bruno Fernandes. Now that came from Disco Mirror. It was actually a decent source of information as well. And it is what it is. I had a bit of a rant in yesterday's video. Thanks for those that watched and commented and liked and did all of that stuff as well. But I don't like. I've got a handful of people that I would actually kind of keep in the cold light of day when you've calmed down a little bit and had a bit more reflection and time to think as well. But genuinely speaking, yeah, I agree with that. I do think that most players should be up for sale. Because we need a rebuild. We need to rebuild the squad. We need to rip it down and start again, in my opinion. Gimme Sport was saying that Manchester United are expected to part ways with 4 players who made Amorim's starting 11 in Bilbao during the summer. Luke Shaw, Casemiro, Andre Onana, and Rasmus Højlund. And I don't disagree with that as well. I think Casemiro's, had a bit of a revival in the Europa League as well, but when facing Premier League opposition with pace and legs and power and all of that stuff, he doesn't have the kind of athleticism for that anymore to cover the ground, and I think the pace of Premier League football is too much for Casemiro. In the Europa League games, when the pace was a little bit slower, he had a bit of a kind of run, but I think in the Premier League it gets found out. Luke Shaw, yeah, I agree with that. Andre Onana, 100%, I think needs to be sold, and Rasmus Højlund's been like a ghost recently, so yeah, I agree. I agree with that as well. Now, this was interesting as well. Chris Wheeler, here we go again in terms of player leaks. So a number of United players feel Ruben Amorim is too overconfident in his approach and cannot understand why he puts so much faith in playing a system that is not suited to the squad. Now, we don't know, firstly, I'm going to play devil's advocate. We don't know who the players are, or what that could just be completely made up. Although Chris Wheeler is a good source and got connections at the club as well. So I kind of, if it was coming from like the Sun or somewhere, then yeah, I would say take that with a pinch of salt as well. But arguably, there could be something in that as well. But it's sink or swim. That's why I kind of like the approach from Ruben Amorim, where he's like, I will not change. This is the system. This is the style of play. And if you cannot fit that style of play or that particular style of football, then unlucky. Off you go. Jurgen Klopp didn't change his approach when he came into Liverpool and he lost the Europa League final. He said, no, I'm sticking by playing the way I want to play. And if the players weren't good enough, they were removed, and they brought in players that fit that particular style of play. And for far too long, we've had managers that have chopped and changed and bowed down to the players. And it just creates this kind of environment where, you give players the power because they're like, oh, well, we don't. Like Ralf Rangnick, for example, had 30 minutes, I think, when he came in, when he looked really good. And the players were like, yeah, that's too much hard work. And we're not going to bother doing that anymore. And then they just decided not to do it. And then what happened? Ralf Rangnick got obviously left. He was interim anyway. Got a manager in. Ten Hag did exactly the same. Lost the first 2 games of the season, wanting to play his style of football. Players couldn't do it. Okay, well, we'll change to suit the players. He's been sacked off now as well, because ultimately the players will eventually throw a manager under the bus unless you remove them and stick by your principles and say, this is how we're going to play football. And if it doesn't suit you, go find another club that suits you if you're not happy about it, rather than bitching and moaning about it. That's my 10 pence worth on that one. I'm sure you will get involved in the comments and let me know what you think regarding that. Now, and one of the biggest issues, I think, at United with the players and stuff, and what the other kind of thing I thought about regarding this piece, was the mentality of the players. The mentality absolutely sucks, where, there's a blame culture at United where it's always somebody else's fault. It's always the manager's fault, or it's always this player that's not passing me the ball, or it's always an excuse. I'm sick of the excuses from the players. Absolutely pig sick of it. And I thought Raphael summed it up in an interview following the defeat, where he said it seems like players just want to complain, not fight. As soon as they sign, they all have an excuse ready. They blame the coach, the club, and even those who arrive with the right mentality are dragged down by this culture. And I completely agree with Raphael's verdict on that as well, because how many times have we signed a top player and then they come to the club and then within a few months they're, a shadow of the player that we've kind of signed as well. There is a toxic culture at United, and that's why I said, and I'm sticking by it as well, barring Amad Diallo, because Amad Diallo's got the right mentality, because some of you were right in the comments yesterday saying that when he got dropped by the FA Cup final and wasn't kind of playing for under Eric Ten Hag, he did not complain, he did not moan, he did not put social media posts out there blaming anybody else. What did he do? Kept his mouth shut, worked hard and worked his way back into the team, and is now arguably one of our best players in the squad as well. And that's why, barring Amad Diallo, anybody that's been here before Ineos has been intoxicated by this absolute blame culture where it's already someone else's fault. None of the players take responsibility and look in the mirror and are always looking to blame someone else. So I completely agree with Raphael. There is a mentality issue and a cultural issue at United that needs to be gone. And I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's Bruno. I don't care if it's players you like or if you don't like, if it's players I like and I don't like. Get rid of them. Anybody that's got that kind of mindset and mentality should be out of the door. They should be the first people out of the door, in my opinion, regardless of ability, because I take attitude over ability any day of the week. Luke Shaw as well, some of the comments from he said, which kind of I thought was interesting as well, said it's a massive club, so much has to change, not just on the pitch but outside of the pitch. Inside the club there needs to be so many changes, and he was asked like what. He said, I don't want to go into too much of them right now, but I don't think it's the right time. So again, Luke Shaw pointing towards stuff going on behind the scenes at United. Obviously he didn't say what. I wish they would just come out and say what it is or who it is, or because I would be so much happier just kind of knowing. Like, I genuinely wish that somebody would just come out instead of all this bullshit leaks around, we don't like the system and stuff. Just tell us what the culture is behind the scenes. I think the only person that did was actually Ronaldo. I don't like the way he did it, but sat on Piers Morgan and said, you can't, none of these players want to listen. And you can make of that what you will. But Diego Dallo also said something similar as well in his post-match press conference, where he said there's a lot of things we need to change, whether it's behaviours every day, standards need to be a lot higher. So you've got, Shaw and Dallo both in post-match press conferences alluding to, culture, attitude, stuff going on behind the scenes as well. So then when we go back to, the leaks, the blame culture, everything like that at United, it's absolutely infuriating. And as I mentioned, any player that's kind of intoxicated with that, regardless of who it is, needs to go, because I think the mentality at the club is the most important. I'd rather take someone's attitude and work rate and mentality over their footballing ability, because because that's you need that kind of winning mindset and you need that professionalism as well, and I think we lack that. So that's the first kind of colour I would be going for. If you're looking to remove players as well, any players that tick that box, get rid. Just on the manager, the message from the club is clear. They will stick with Ruben Amorim and support him. The club feel that Ruben Amorim is the right man for the job. And that's the one thing from his history at Sporting. He will not tolerate bullshit and players in the dressing room that do not toe the line. He did exactly the same thing at Sporting, where anybody that was kind of questioning his authority or not toeing the line or becoming a bit of a, non-professional, however you kind of want to word it behind the scenes, he was not afraid to get rid of them. And that's why I think, you have to back him, because that's what we need. We need to get rid of these players with the wrong mentality and the wrong mindset. Ruben Amorim's appointment at United has always and continues to be seen as a longer-term project, and the club's commitment to him is not contingent on one game. Sources say he continues to have the full support of the club, and that came from Sky. And then Mark Ogden, interestingly, said this, that Ruben Amorim told the scouting department he wanted more energy and mobility in midfield, as he was concerned his current options lacked the speed, power and athleticism to compete in the Premier League. He approached the Europa League final worried about his team's ability to compete physically with Spurs, and I do agree with that as well. But then I disagree. Like, I think if that story's to be believed, and Mark Ogden is a good source of information, then why did Amorim leave one of his most athletic, physical midfielders on the bench in Manuel Ugarte? But then As I mentioned in yesterday's video, Ducati's been terrible recently with his ball playing and stuff, but he does have that at least. So if he was worried about it before the final, why did you bench and not even play your only midfielder that actually has that? So I'm a little bit unsure what to kind of believe in that story. But I do think that, that's the right profile of player going forward, though. Energy, mobility, physicality, all of that stuff in the midfield, I do kind of wholeheartedly agree with, because it's the engine room of the team. And for how long has it been since we had, a good midfield at United? And then moving on to the rebuild. So United intends to go big this summer with a proper clear out planned on top of lots of players up for sale, and also wants to make multiple top signings. The loss yesterday was not has not hampered their intentions and plans. Now, that came for United Nad, who can be a decent source of information, doesn't normally post much, works for an aggregator, a site as well, but can sometimes get inside information as well, to go big this summer with a proper clear out, with lots of players up for sale. Obviously, we just brought you the news regarding from the Mirror, and will not be hampered. Why can I not say that word today? Hampered their intentions and plans not being in the Europa League. So if you remember all the way back, I can't remember what it was. I think it was in like January, February time, when United had already started planning for no Europa League football. So there is a plan in place at United for not getting Champions League football. They've already kind of planned for this eventuality, but as we kind of started getting further and further along in the Europa League, that's when they kind of thought, well, maybe we should start planning for if we do get the Champions League, which is why we're getting all these conflicting stories regarding, going from Liam Delap at 30 million to Gyökeres at 55 million, and obviously higher wages and stuff, because they have been planning for this. They planned for non-Champions League football in a transfer window, what that would look like, and then they've also planned for a summer transfer window with Champions League football and what that would look like as well. It's just depending on, exits and stuff. And we'll go through the finances in a second, but there's a plan in place to kind of do this, and I just hope they follow through, because, like I said, if we're sacking staff and making cutbacks on charities, and there's rumors coming out that we're going to be sacking another 200 odd staff members today as well, then that kind of mentality and that cutthroat approach that Ineos are kind of doing has to go into the first team squad as well, and that's the only way it would be consistent, because you can't be sacking average kind of staff members and stuff and doing all these cutbacks and then continuing to pay some of these players the wages that they are as well when they're not performing on the pitch. So if the standards are okay, we want to make cutbacks in the kind of staffing, you've got to trim the squad as well, because obviously we don't have any European football next season, so the squad's going to have to be trimmed anyway. Now, in terms of going back to what Mark Ogden said, so Ruben Amorim wants United to target players who will add pace, power, and athleticism to his midfield this summer. So as well as going for the attack and strengthening there, because we know we're getting Cunha, that deal's effectively done. We're just waiting for the here we go on that one, and then for them to sort out the structured payments for his release clause with Wolves. That's the stage we're at with the Cunha deal. But then we know we're interested in a striker, but then the midfield, got to be a priority after that as well, especially if you're going back to the previous story when it said if Casemiro's going to be sold, but then, getting rid of Casemiro is going to be one of these where, because of his wages, but then maybe Amorim has a word with him and says, look, I can't see you fitting within the team, and we've only got Premier League games next season. You're not going to play hardly. Does that kind of force then Casemiro to think, well, actually, yeah, maybe I do need to kind of go somewhere where I am going to play football. So not getting the Champions League or not getting Europe actually might then force some players to kind of look at their own kind of career and think about their own minutes on the pitch. Because if you've got multiple games in a week and you're a squad member or a fringe player, your minutes are going to be massively limited next season. So maybe that does kind of resonate with some of the players, where they'll actually maybe be more inclined to accept a move outside of United rather than staying and really not playing. But I do like the thought of going for midfield. Pace, power, athleticism. We are far too weak. That's one of our big problems. We've got, we're far too weak, easy to run over, lose all of our duels, lose all of our battles, don't have any speed, and you wonder why we're 16th or 17th, potentially 17th in the league as well. And we struggle in literally every single Premier League game we've played pretty much this season. But yeah, give us your thoughts on that in the comments. Obviously, we can only do a rebuild if it's financially viable. So the cost of Manchester United missing out on Champions League qualification and poor performances in the Premier League is around £150 million. So according to James Ducker of The Telegraph, who's a good source, the total cost of missing out on Champions League and our Premier League position could be around £150 million. Now, I don't know if that's just all, like, obviously we've got sponsorship deals. We've had to pay Adidas £10 million now back from their sponsorship deal because of not being in the Champions League. There's the gate revenue that we would get for the extra games at Old Trafford, the other sponsorship deals, and all of those things as well. So it's going to be difficult to do the rebuild when you're going to potentially lose £150 million, and you're owned by the Glazer families who have kept us in debt, and we're paying interest on debt payments and stuff as well. But the only way I think you can do that is through player sales. We've got to get the sales right. Because bringing in revenue through player sales is going to massively help us in the transfer window. So let's go through some of the exit news. So Amorim wants Bruno Fernandes to stay. He has a big offer from Saudi. Let's see what the club decides after the quotes from him saying the club opens the door for an exit, he will leave. So Fabrizio Romano saying that Amorim wants Bruno to stay, but let's see what the club does, because if you're dangled £100 million and you've lost £150 million in income and you want to do a rebuild, there might need to be a sacrificial someone that you sacrifice in the squad. I think Bruno is one of the only players in the team and in the squad that actually holds some value that you would get significant sums of money for. Does that change the club's mind? Obviously, Amorim wants to keep him, but what do you do? What do you do when you kind of dangled that sort of money as well? So we'll have to wait and see how that kind of plays out. On Bruno, though, Alex Crook said it is still unlikely United would cash in on Bruno Fernandes given his importance to the team. And Sky was saying that Saudi Pro League club Al Hilal are interested in signing Manchester United captain Bruno Fernandes. So we're going to have to see how that one kind of plays out, whether we would accept the bid now that we know we're not in the Champions League. And we need the kind of funding as well. I think there's other players that you could sell to get the money in this summer, because, it's all very well good saying we need a rebuild and we want to get rid of these players, right? I am realistic as well. You're not going to get all this done in a summer. No chance are we going to get this, but you can start the kind of process and you can kind of show a little bit of ruthlessness regarding it as well, because removing players is going to be our biggest kind of problems because of the wages, and then where do the players want to go as well. But then hopefully, like I said, no European football might force some of these players to reconsider their careers, because they might not get any game time next season because we're only playing one game a week all season, apart from the odd kind of cup game here and there. But a player's really going to want to sit around and play the odd Carabao Cup game here and there? Probably not. But it will show more about their character and their mentality, because if they do, then we just know full well they're only here for the money. That's the only reason you would stick around, in my opinion, for some of these players as well. But yeah, we'll have to kind of wait. But if we did get that big offer from Bruno, where do we go? Where do we go with there? So give us your shouts on that in the comments below. Now, another player mentioned in the previous story was Rasmus Højlund. So Inter are considering Rasmus Højlund as an option this summer after Juventus and Napoli call in March. It is up to Man United. So Fabrizio Romano, again, remember he did say, and if you watched all of yesterday's video, that keep an eye on Rasmus Højlund and Italian clubs in the summer as well. I think we might struggle to sell Højlund because of his book value from PSR. So it might be a loan, maybe with an obligation or an option to buy as well, just to see if he can kind of revive his career, because it's not heading in the right direction at United, let's say that. And the futures of Rasmus Højlund and Casemiro are in doubt. That came from James Ducker with The Telegraph. So again, more reports of Højlund and Casemiro, but the problem with Casemiro is his wages. But again, with no European football, is that going to force a kind of issue? Because you've got to have a word with him, say, look, where are you going to play? Because I can't play you in the Premier League. You're not going to play in Europe because we're not in Europe, unless you do want to stick around for your 320 grand a week or 300 grand a week, whatever it's going to go down to, and just play, an odd Carabao Cup game or make the odd substitute appearance as well. Is that something Casemiro wants to do at this stage of his career? We'll have to wait and see. And then the other player that we're probably going to sell, going off of the recent reports and the interview and everything like that as well, is Garnacho. So Fabrizio Romano said the relationship between Garnacho and the club has not been the same since January. The feeling is that if the club receives a good offer, he will leave. United would likely accept an offer of around £60 million for Alejandro Garnacho. Chelsea and Napoli could renew their interest this summer. Again, came from James Ducker in The Telegraph. And Samuel Lucas put out this bit of a hit piece on Garnacho. I'm going to read it to you, but Samuel Lucas is a shit stirrer. So just bear that in mind. But he said that Garnacho is becoming a problem for United. He has developed an inflated air of entitlement, and it should startle United. The 20-year-old brazenly sounded off about a shit season, criticised the manager's decision to drop him, and cast doubt on his future. His gobby brother had also joined in online. The authority of the United manager role should always be protected, but Garnacho is a nuanced case. So Samuel Lucas, like I said, bit of a shit. Well, definitely he is a shit stirrer. Coming out with an opinion piece that, and it's. I don't want to agree with Samuel Lucas, but yeah, I think that's just kicking a player while they're down. Personally, if Garnacho's gonna go, who cares? Who genuinely, who gives a shit what Samuel Lucas has got to say regarding that? That's my opinion towards that, because he's going to go anyway. I don't agree with his decisions and what kind of Garnacho's been doing. I don't like that side of thing. I said that yesterday. I don't like all this, because he's got form. It's not just one off. Like Garnacho's actually done more online than Jadon Sancho did. And he's done more online than Marcus Rashford ever did, because Rashford never does anything like that publicly. Probably with Rashford was stuff behind the scenes, Amorim was saying his training performances and stuff, but Garnacho's been liking posts all the time, criticising Eric Ten Hag, criticising Lisandro Martinez. He's got form for doing that sort of thing, and I don't like it. I don't like that sort of thing personally, regardless of the quality and talent of the player. Goes back to what I was saying before, mentality, mindset, that kind of, toxic environment, that blame culture behind the scenes. Don't like any of it. But give us your thoughts and opinions on that, and as I'm sure you will in the comments below. Sources close to Kobbie Mainoo say he wants to stay, but has reservations about his role in Ruben Amorim's system. That came from Alex Crook. There's been a few other reports as well suggesting a similar thing, that Kobbie Mainoo wants to sign his new contract, but is worried about where he fits within the kind of squad and the role. I just think he's been unlucky with injuries, and he's looked off it this season. I don't want to sell Kobbie Mainoo personally, because obviously, and I read all your comments yesterday, I think some of you were right as well. Do you know what I mean? The worry is you back Amorim and you sell all of the kind of young talents that you've got within the squad. What happens then if it doesn't work out with Amorim and you've sold Kobbie Mainoo, and then the next manager would maybe be like, okay, well, I would actually like him, and he goes away and does really well. So I do think there needs to be a bit of patience with some of the players in the team. Kobbie Mainoo is one that, if you can't find, it's one of these. I think he's got potential, so I would probably keep Kobbie Mainoo for now, especially if you're going to be selling Garnacho, and there's other players in the squad that you can sell to make money, and then maybe that's a next season problem where you're like, well, okay, well, let's see how he does after a pre-season, and if Amorim kind of does fit in within the kind of squad and within the team, then see how he kind of goes from there, personally, with Mainoo. Now, Jadon Sancho on loan at Chelsea will return to United this summer, but will be offloaded as one of the club's highest paid stars, along with Rashford. So, get Disco Mirror suggesting that maybe Sancho's going to come back on loan, off of his loan, and that Chelsea are going to pay the £5 million termination to send him back. But regardless, we're going to look to sell him anyway. It's just, will that be a quick deal? I hope they've got stuff like that lined up for Jadon Sancho. As one of the club's highest paid stars. That's insane, isn't it? The whole kind of situation regarding that is insane. And along with Rashford as well. So yeah, we do know that we're looking to obviously sell Sancho. Rashford and Antony are the three, amongst others, going off of the reports. And then the final story I've got for you is regarding incoming. So Manchester United are in the running for Jean-Philippe Mateta, while Victor Gyökeres is the desired target. Now, that came from Tanzolik, who works for L'Equipe, who's a good source of information as well. Very, very credible. Not a Romano or an Ornstein, but he's a decent source of information suggesting that United are in the running for Jean-Philippe Mateta. But Victor Gyökeres is the desired target. But whether, obviously, now we know we're not in the Champions League, we'll have to wait and see how that kind of develops, what sort of money we've got, what budget we've got. Will it depend on sales? Will Gyökeres want to come without Champions League? As the reports are that he doesn't. He wants to go to a more stable club. But, would he see it as a challenge? I mean, I was thinking the other day that like Casemiro came in after we lost the 2 games of the season. And apparently his agent rang up the club and said, look, Casemiro wants to come because he wants to help you rebuild. And some players out there do have that sort of mindset. I don't know what Gyökeres is kind of thinking and what's in his head. Obviously, nobody does. But there could be something in that as well. But or is that me just clutching at straws? Because obviously we're on a bit of a downward spiral at the moment as well. But when you hit the bottom, I think this is, hopefully anyway. I hope I'm right when I say this. Surely it can only get better from here. Surely it can only get better from here. I mean, if we recruit right and if we sell right, then the only way is up going forward. How far and how fast depends. All depends on the situation of the club, the finances, the recruitment and bits as well. So, but give us your thoughts on all of that in the comments below, because that's you all up to date with the latest news. Don't forget to smash a like on the video on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. See you in the next one.